The battlefield was quiet, but Elias Vance knew better than to trust the silence. The acrid tang of burnt metal hung in the air, mingling with the faint hum of distant skirmishes. Craters and shattered trees dotted the barren landscape, remnants of humanity's relentless advance into alien territory. Each step Elias took across the uneven ground felt heavy, the weight of his reinforced combat suit amplifying his fatigue. He scanned the horizon, his helmet's visor glowing faintly as it analyzed the terrain for potential threats. Elias had seen enough war to know the signs of an ambush, but this sector was different. His orders were simple: scout, report, and, if necessary, neutralize any hostile presence. Yet the deeper he ventured into the uncharted zone, the more his instincts screamed at him that something wasn't right. He paused near a jagged outcrop, his breath steady as he surveyed the area. It was then that he noticed it, a faint shimmer of movement in the rubble ahead. Dropping into a crouch, Elias raised his rifle, his finger brushing the trigger as his visor locked onto the source. The shimmer resolved into a figure, small and trembling, partially obscured by the wreckage. Cautiously he approached. His boots crunched softly against the debris, the sound unnervingly loud in the stillness. When he drew close enough to see clearly, his grip on the rifle faltered. It wasn't an enemy soldier. It wasn't even human. The creature was unlike anything he'd encountered. Her skin glowed faintly, a soft silver hue that pulsed with an inner light. Delicate patterns of bioluminescence flickered across her arms, as though her body was trying to communicate in a language he couldn't understand. Her eyes, large and luminescent, locked onto his, filled with a mixture of fear and desperation. She clutched her side, dark, viscous blood seeping through her slender fingers. For a moment, Elias stood frozen. Protocol dictated that he eliminate any non-human presence. Aliens were the enemy, dangerous, deceitful, and a threat to humanity's survival. But this girl, barely more than a child, looked anything but dangerous. Her frailty reminded him of the orphans he'd seen on devastated human colonies, children whose lives were snuffed out by the very war he fought. The girl whimpered, shrinking further into the rubble as his rifle hovered unsteadily in her direction. Her other hand lifted slowly, palm facing him in what seemed like a plea. Elias's chest tightened. He glanced around, scanning for signs of an ambush, but there was nothing. Just her. She was alone. A distant roar broke the moment. Human soldiers approaching. The rhythmic thudding of boots and the faint crackle of radio chatter drew closer. Elias had seconds to decide. He could leave her here, an easy target for the squad sweeping the area. Or he could break every rule, every directive, and protect her. He cursed under his breath, slinging his rifle over his shoulder. "Stay quiet," he muttered, though he doubted she understood. He reached out, gently prying her hand away from her wound to inspect it. The injury was deep, but not fatal. Before he could think too hard about his actions, Elias scooped her into his arms, her small frame almost weightless against him. Her glowing eyes widened in surprise, but she didn't resist. The first soldier's silhouette appeared over the ridge, and Elias dove behind the rubble, holding the girl tightly. "Hang on," he whispered as he readied himself for what came next. The encounter had set the course for a decision that would change his life forever, and perhaps humanity's fate as well. The whine of approaching drones cut through the air, their sleek forms visible against the darkening sky. Elias gritted his teeth, shifting Zavia in his arms as he ducked behind a jagged ridge. Her glowing skin, though mesmerizing, was a beacon in the twilight. He tore a strip from his uniform, wrapping it carefully around her arms and shoulders to dull the radiance. She winced but didn't cry out. The soldiers were getting closer. Elias could hear their boots crunching over debris, their voices sharp as they barked commands. They were sweeping the area with brutal efficiency, leaving no corner unchecked. Elias scanned their surroundings. A dense thicket of alien vegetation loomed a few meters away, gnarled, twisted vines that could provide temporary cover. He crouched low, his grip firm around Zavia. "We're moving," he whispered. She blinked at him, her large, luminescent eyes filled with trust and fear. He darted toward the thicket, his movements swift but controlled. The vines were tough, scratching at his armor as he pushed through. Zavia clung to him tightly, her small hands gripping his chest plate. The faint glow from her skin illuminated their path, casting eerie shadows on the gnarled branches. Behind them, the soldiers had reached the ridge. "Spread out," one of them shouted. "They can't have gone far." Elias pressed his back against a thick trunk, holding Zavia close to his chest. He could hear the faint hum of a drone passing overhead. It was equipped with thermal sensors. Hiding wouldn't be enough. He activated his suit's thermal dampener, a last resort feature that would mask his heat signature for a few precious minutes. "Stay still," he murmured to Zavia. She seemed to understand, her breathing shallow and quiet. The drone paused above their position, its searchlight scanning the foliage. Elias held his breath, every muscle tensed. Seconds felt like hours as the beam of light passed inches from their hiding spot. Finally, the drone moved on, its hum fading into the distance. Elias exhaled slowly, his mind racing. They couldn't keep running blindly. He needed a plan. He glanced at Zavia, her eyes locked on him with a quiet intensity. "Do you understand me?" he asked softly. She hesitated, then nodded. Her delicate fingers brushed his forehead, and for a brief moment, an image flashed in his mind. A crystalline structure, ancient and hidden, nestled deep within the planet's surface. He blinked, disoriented. "Is that a safe place?" he asked. She nodded again, more urgently this time. "All right," he said, adjusting his grip on her. "We'll head there." They moved carefully through the dense underbrush, the soldiers' voices fading behind them. Elias's injuries from earlier began to take their toll. His shoulder throbbed where shrapnel had grazed him, and his legs burned from exertion. But he pushed on, driven by a fierce determination to protect the girl in his arms. The vegetation began to thin, revealing a jagged ravine ahead. A faint glow emanated from its depths, the same crystalline structure Zavia had shown him. Relief flooded through him, but it was short-lived. "Target spotted," a soldier's voice rang out behind them. Elias spun around, shielding Zavia as a burst of plasma fire erupted, searing the air around them. He returned fire with precise shots, taking down one of the soldiers. Another drone swooped low, its targeting systems locking onto him. A sudden warmth spread through his chest. Zavia's hand glowed brightly, and a shimmering shield of energy enveloped them. The drone's weaponry ricocheted harmlessly off the barrier, buying them precious seconds. Elias didn't waste the opportunity. He sprinted toward the ravine, the crystalline structure growing brighter with each step. As they reached its edge, the ground trembled, and an entrance opened, swallowing them into the safety of the cavern below. For a moment, there was silence. Elias set Zavia down gently, his breathing ragged. She touched his shoulder, her glow dimming as exhaustion overtook her. "We're safe for now," he said, though the weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on him. The soldiers wouldn't stop, and their escape had only just begun. The crystalline cavern shimmered like a dream, its walls pulsing faintly with an otherworldly energy. The light seemed to respond to Zavia's presence, brightening as she stirred. Elias sat against the smooth wall, his rifle resting across his lap, eyes scanning for any signs of pursuit. Though they were safe for the moment, he knew the soldiers wouldn't give up. Zavia knelt near the center of the cavern, her glowing hands pressed against the ground. Patterns of light radiated outward, illuminating intricate carvings that stretched across the chamber. She looked back at Elias, her expression a mix of determination and urgency. "You know something I don't," Elias muttered, forcing himself to his feet despite the pain coursing through his body. His wounds throbbed, but they were secondary to the question gnawing at him. "What is this place?" Zavia hesitated, then extended her hand toward him. When he took it, another vision flooded his mind, a vibrant planet teeming with life, Zavia's kind tending to ecosystems, their energy weaving the threads of existence itself. The vision shifted to devastation. Human ships descending, fire and destruction consuming everything. Her people had been guardians, and humanity had become their executioners. Elias stumbled back, overwhelmed. "You're a protector, a healer," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. The guilt that had been simmering since he found her now burned like a brand. "We've been fighting this war without understanding what we've destroyed." Zavia approached him, her touch gentle. A wave of warmth spread through his body as she focused her energy on his wounds. His burns and cuts began to close, leaving faint scars in their place. Though she couldn't fully heal him, the pain ebbed, replaced by clarity. "Why show me this?" he asked. "Why trust me?" She reached toward his forehead again, sharing a final, desperate vision. Humanity on the brink of self-destruction, its own violence consuming its future. Her people's role wasn't just to protect their world, but to guide others, to offer a chance at redemption before it was too late. Elias realized the weight of her presence. She was a living bridge between species, a hope that not all was lost. Before he could speak, the sound of distant explosions reverberated through the cavern. The soldiers had found them. Elias's jaw tightened as he retrieved his rifle and moved toward the entrance. Zavia stood behind him, her faint glow intensifying, as if preparing for what was to come. The first soldier appeared at the edge of the ravine, his visor gleaming in the dim light. "Stand down, Captain Vance," he ordered. "You've done your duty. Turn the alien over, and we'll overlook your deviation." Elias raised his weapon, but didn't fire. "This isn't an enemy. She's not what you think she is." "Doesn't matter," the soldier snapped. "Orders are orders." The squad advanced, weapons trained on Elias and Zavia. Behind him, the crystalline structure hummed louder, responding to Zavia's growing energy. Elias made his choice in that moment, one born not of duty, but of humanity. He stepped forward, firing controlled bursts that forced the soldiers into cover. "Go," he shouted at Zavia, though he wasn't sure she could understand him. "Get to the core, or whatever it is you need to do." Zavia hesitated, her eyes locked on his. Then, with a wave of her hand, a barrier of light erupted between Elias and the soldiers, giving her the time she needed. She turned and ran deeper into the cavern, her glow disappearing into the crystalline depths. Elias held his ground, buying her every second he could. His ammunition ran low, and the barrier began to flicker, but he stood firm. When the soldiers finally broke through, they found only him, battered and defiant, guarding the path behind him. As the soldiers subdued him, a deafening pulse shook the cavern. The crystalline walls lit up in a brilliant cascade, forcing everyone to shield their eyes. When the light faded, Zavia was gone, her presence replaced by a profound stillness. Elias smiled faintly, the scars on his body and soul now symbols of his choice. He had given her the chance to carry hope forward, a chance for humanity's redemption. And for the first time in years, he felt at peace.